When we talk about the idea of alien gods, we are touching on a topic that has fascinated and intrigued many people throughout history. This theory suggests that the gods mentioned in the stories and mythologies of ancient civilizations, such as the Sumerians, Egyptians, and Mayans, could actually be extraterrestrial beings who came to Earth. Just imagine, beings from other planets visiting our world and being worshipped as deities. This perspective leads us to question the origin of many spiritual beliefs and practices that we have inherited. In my spiritual journey, I have always sought to understand the connection between the human and the divine. The concept of alien gods invites us to expand this vision, to think that perhaps there are realities beyond our understanding. Ancient people, faced with phenomena that they could not explain, could have interpreted these visits as divine manifestations. This connection between heaven and earth, between humans and extraterrestrials, is a powerful idea that makes us reflect on our own existence. In many accounts, these beings are described as possessing far superior knowledge and technology, which could justify the veneration they received. When I consider this possibility, I realize that what we consider sacred may actually have roots in experiences that transcend our current understanding. This interpretation not only challenges the traditional view of spirituality, but also opens space for a deeper dialogue about what it means to be human in a vast and mysterious universe. Furthermore, the idea that gods could be extraterrestrials leads us to reflect on the nature of spirituality. Are we ready to accept that the divine can take forms that we cannot imagine? This question is fundamental, because it forces us to broaden our horizons and consider that truth can be much more complex than the narratives we have been taught. The search for truth, in this sense, becomes a spiritual path that connects us not only with the history of humanity, but also with the cosmos. When I talk to people who share this fascination, I realize that we all have a need to connect with something greater. This connection can then be seen through the lens of beings who come from afar, bringing not only knowledge, but also a new perspective on who we are. The concept of alien gods encourages us to explore these possibilities, to ask ourselves how the influence of advanced civilizations might have shaped our beliefs and practices. Ultimately, by reflecting on the concept of alien gods, we are invited to question the story we have been told and to consider new narratives that can enrich our understanding of the world and ourselves. This journey of discovery is not only fascinating, but also profoundly transformative, as it moves us toward a future where spirituality and science can coexist, revealing the truths that unite us in our search for meaning and connection in the vast universe. The interpretation of ancient texts is a fascinating field that leads us to reflect on how past civilizations understood the world around them. When we look at religious and mythological texts, such as the Bible, the Mahabharata, or the myths of ancient Greece, we find narratives that describe extraordinary events, often involving powerful beings descending from the sky. For some, these stories are not mere allegories, but rather accounts of encounters with extraterrestrial beings. Have you ever stopped to think about this? A notable example is Ezekiel's narrative in the Bible, where he describes a vision of wheels within wheels and unusual-looking beings. If we look at these accounts with a new perspective, we can consider that the description of what Ezekiel saw could refer to advanced technology, something that he could not have comprehended in his time. For many, this suggests that these encounters were not simply divine, but rather interactions with visitors from other worlds. Another example is the Mahabharata, which contains descriptions of powerful weapons that can be seen as analogous to modern technology. When the texts talk about vimanas, aerial vehicles capable of flying, it is easy to imagine that these accounts could be rooted in experiences of contact with beings from other planets. This perspective leads us to ask, to what extent are our interpretations limited by our own experiences and the technology available in our time? As we investigate these narratives, it is important to consider the cultural and historical context. Ancient civilizations did not have the same scientific understanding that we have today. Therefore, it is understandable that they would attribute divine meaning to phenomena that they could not explain. But if we look through a wider lens, we can see that these texts may have a broader meaning, suggesting that the deities they worshipped might actually be beings who came from other places. Of course, this approach is not without controversy. Many scholars and archaeologists criticize this interpretation, arguing that it distorts the original meaning of the texts. They point out that these narratives should be understood within the context of local beliefs and mythologies, and not as historical records of extraterrestrial encounters. And I understand this point of view because cultural tradition and spirituality have their own value and meaning. However, I often wonder, what if there is a point of intersection between these interpretations? What if, by considering the possibility that these accounts could be descriptions of encounters with beings from other planets, we are also honoring the wisdom and curiosity of our ancestors? After all, the search for the unknown has always been part of the human experience. In this way, the interpretation of ancient texts can be an invitation to reflection. As we read these stories, we are called to explore not only what they mean in their original context, but also what they can teach us about ourselves and our place in the vast universe. This journey of discovery is undoubtedly an essential part of our spiritual and intellectual evolution. What do you think? Are we ready to open our minds and hearts to new possibilities? The interpretation of ancient texts is a fascinating and often controversial field. When we talk about the possibility of alien gods, this analysis becomes even more intriguing. Many religious texts, such as the Bible, the Vedas, or Mesopotamian myths, are often seen as accounts of divine experiences. However, an alternative reading suggests that these accounts may actually be descriptions of encounters with beings from other worlds, which leads us to wonder, have these narratives been misinterpreted over the centuries? When I delve into this discussion, I realize that the ancients did not have our understanding of the universe and life beyond Earth. For them, any extraordinary event could be attributed to a deity. Imagine a people who, upon observing a luminous object in the sky, interpret it as a sign from the gods. This idea is not so far from our current reality, where we often look to the sky and dream of extraterrestrial life. A classic example that can be analyzed is the book of Ezekiel in the Old Testament. Ezekiel's vision of a shining cloud accompanied by beings with extraordinary characteristics can be reinterpreted in light of the theory of alien gods. Instead of being celestial creatures, these beings could be visitors from other planets, with technology so advanced that it would be seen as divine for the time. This interpretation causes an interesting deviation from the way we have always understood these texts. In addition, stories of gods who descend to Earth in chariots of fire, as in the case of the Hindu god Agni, can be seen from a new perspective. If we consider that these chariots could be spaceships, the narrative becomes something that seems closer to science fiction than to traditional religion. This connection between science and spirituality is something that I have explored in my reflections, and that resonates deeply with many who seek to understand our existence. Another interesting facet is the way in which these interpretations can help to unite cultures. Similar stories of encounters with higher beings can be found in various traditions around the world. This raises the question, was there, at some point in history, a real contact that influenced different civilizations? The idea that we all share a common origin, perhaps mediated by beings from other planets, is a line of thinking that can bring a sense of unity among peoples. However, it is important to remember that this approach is not universally accepted. Critics point out that reinterpreting ancient texts in this way can distort their original meaning and the rich spiritual tradition that many of them carry. For many, these texts are sacred and should not be reduced to mere narratives of extraterrestrial encounters. It is a discussion that ultimately leads us to consider how spirituality and science can coexist in a productive dialogue. As I reflect on these points, I feel that we are only beginning to scratch the surface of what these ancient texts really mean. The search for answers continues, and as we explore the possibilities, we must remember to respect the depth and wisdom that these spiritual traditions have to offer. After all, what we ultimately seek is to understand ourselves and our place in a vast and mysterious universe. Artistic depictions of ancient civilizations offer us a fascinating window into for their beliefs and understanding of the world. Throughout history, art has not only depicted everyday life, but also addressed spiritual and metaphysical themes. When we talk about alien gods, It is interesting to see how various works of art can be interpreted in this new light. In various cultures, we find figures that are far from what we consider human. For example, in cave paintings, some figures have elongated shapes or disproportionate heads. These elements can be seen as representations of beings that do not fit the standards of our species. Personally, when I look at these images, I feel immense curiosity about what these societies were trying to communicate. Were they describing beings that had visited Earth, or were they perhaps manifestations of their own spiritual experiences? In addition, there are sculptures and hieroglyphics that refer to disc-shaped vehicles or figures with costumes that resemble those we imagine seeing in science fiction stories. A striking example is the famous artifact of the Mayan culture, known as the Mayan astronaut. This depiction features a figure that, at first glance, could be mistaken for an astronaut, wearing a helmet and surrounded by symbols that many believe represent advanced technology. For me, it is impossible not to feel a chill when considering the possibility that our ancestors were communicating with beings from other worlds. In addition, many ancient temples and monuments, such as the pyramids of Egypt, are adorned with images that can be interpreted as representations of gods coming from the sky. These impressive constructions, which defy modern logic, raise the question of how a civilization without the technology we have today was able to accomplish such feats. The idea that these civilizations could have received help from extraterrestrial beings is a hypothesis that, although controversial, makes us reflect on what we really know about our history. Of course, the interpretation of these works of art is not unanimous. Critics often argue that these representations are merely cultural expressions, symbolizing gods and myths that were relevant to those societies. However, when we look at the historical context, we realize that the line between the sacred and the extraterrestrial may be more blurred than we think. Popular culture has undoubtedly appropriated these ideas. Films and series often explore the connection between ancient art and alien beings, creating a fascinating dialogue between what we know and what we imagine. This generates a growing interest in understanding our roots and the influences that shaped our perception of divinity and existence. In short, ancient artistic representations are not just static images in time, they are invitations to explore our own beliefs and questions. When we reflect on these works, we are challenged to look beyond what is conventional and to consider the possibility that, just like us, past civilizations were trying to understand the universe and their place in it. This journey of discovery, which involves both art and spirituality, connects us to something greater, perhaps even to a legacy shared with beings from other worlds. Another relevant philosophical question is morality and ethics. If extraterrestrial beings have indeed influenced or shaped our civilization, what is our responsibility toward these entities? Should we revere these beings as gods or, on the contrary, see them as our fellow human beings who may also have their flaws and imperfections? This dilemma forces us to reconsider what it means to be ethical and moral in a broader context, where what we consider sacred may be questioned. Throughout my career, I've always believed that the pursuit of knowledge is one of the noblest human adventures. When we encounter these types of questions, we are led to a space where science and spirituality meet. This intersection is rich in possibilities and allows us to explore new dimensions of human understanding. Finally, it is essential that we approach these topics with an open but critical mind. Skepticism is a valuable tool in any inquiry. We must be willing to question our own beliefs without fear of exploring the unknown. Philosophy teaches us that reflection is as important as the final answer. And by seeking to understand the possibility of alien gods, we can discover more about ourselves than we can about these hypothetical beings. Therefore, when we reflect on the origin of humanity and the possibility of life on other planets, we are invited to a journey of self-discovery and expansion of consciousness. It is an opportunity to re-examine our beliefs, broaden our horizons and, who knows, find new truths that resonate in our hearts and minds. This search, however unexplored, sharp as it may be, it can reveal not only the universe around us, but also the depths of our own being.